Hi everybody. So I'm Jez from Live Union and this is Sandy from National Grid. And what we wanted to do now is just share the story of the Global Youth Engineering Climate Conference. And we want to use that to illustrate also how much more inclusive events can be. The way that the merging of live and digital channels has allowed us to do that. And also why inclusivity is so important. I think before we go any further, it's worth just stepping back a moment and considering how powerful conferences and events have become in the wider world today. You know, when you consider events like Davos or events like COP, these events set the global agenda. And actually the same is true in almost any business sector. If you consider a sector like finance, for example, you have events that are almost the kind of milestones of the year. You have things like Cybos, you have things like Money 2020. In tech, you've got CES, you've got Mobile World Congress. So these events are incredibly powerful. And that's also true within individual businesses. If you think about a large business, events are the way that new ideas gain saliency. And they're also the way that future ambitious leaders get noticed. But for all the amazing things about events, they actually also have a kind of inbuilt exclusivity. They're costly to attend. They exclude people who have a long way to travel or perhaps don't want to fly. They are very much designed as, they're sort of extrovert-friendly spaces, not introvert-friendly spaces. You know, the presenting, the asking questions, the networking. And I think with their inbuilt behaviors, they're more comfortable places for some socio-demographics than others. During the pandemic, we at Live Union did a report that we called Anatomy of the Event Audience, where we went out and we spoke to comms leads and event leads in large companies to find out how their audiences were responding to the pivot to virtual. And one of the positives that came back time and time again were people loved the fact that they were more inclusive. They talked about virtual events being less hierarchical. They loved the fact that events that they were previously excluded to because of travel, they could attend. I remember we spoke to a woman called Kate Harris, who's head of internal events at ARM. And she said that her audience at ARM, largely computer engineers, and a lot of them quite introverted. And the fact that actually they'd found virtual events a better networking experience than in-person events. And she talked about how this was driving real business value for them, this sort of cross-pollination of ideas that virtual was allowing to happen in their events.
Right, over to me. So the first reason is the why. Why did we choose to do this? The idea came about pre-pandemic. We commissioned a report which led our Job That Can't Wait campaign. It was the Building the Net Zero Energy Workforce report, which highlighted the fact that the UK energy industry needed more than 400,000 jobs in order to hit net zero by 2050. The second part was we decided to become a principal partner at COP26, which gave us the all-important budget to make things happen and do things. My boss at the time, when we started the COP journey, was we want to create a youth conference. It builds in with the report. It gives us something to do to target a youth sort of audience and get them to join in conversations, inspire them, give them confidence to make changes in their own things, in their own areas. Also give them a network of people that they can build on and use throughout their work life, which I'm sure each of you have got when you've been given a task to do and ring somebody, phone a friend and kind of help. I've been asked to do this and I don't know how. We originally looked at doing a multi-location hybrid kind of event, looking at cinemas throughout the world, but it became pretty evident very quickly that actually this was A, expensive, and B, still not inclusive because people will still have to travel to their local cinema and we're only based in the UK and US, so to be truly global it's going to be difficult to pull off. And then COVID hit and virtual events rose absolutely everywhere, and it gave us the opportunity to do something which was truly global and truly inclusive. The objective, as I said, was to A, build a network of young engineers, like-minded people, help them in their career choices, help them with their careers, help them make the changes that they need, and connect sort of the richer and the poorer countries, those with the money in order to invest in the technology, and those that are actually suffering from the effects of climate change at the moment and need everyone to act now. We looked at our audience and who we wanted to target. We initially started with an 18 to 25-year-old, as that's generally what youth means. Having talked to partners and professional bodies and institutes, that expanded to 16 to 35, because the US career choices are later, here they're earlier. In order you take your A-levels, you're narrowing down the choice of things that you get to do. The other idea was as diverse a background as possible. My boss turned around and went, I'd rather have 5,000 people from 20 different countries than 10,000 from 3 different countries. So let's see what we can do. It became very evident that I severely lacked the skill set. I'm not an engineer, so I wouldn't know what content to create, and I left the 35 bracket quite some time ago. So it was like, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to do this. But we've got a great grad programme that we've got in National Grid, which has grads from the UK and the US. So the idea came about that we kind of get them to help curate the content. So it was targeted at their age range. It was them that were creating something that they would like to see and they would like to watch. We also leaned on partners. We got people on board. We basically said, we're putting this on. We'd like you to come and join us on the journey. A, to help us market it. B, your expertise. We don't know everything. And C, to spread the word as wide as possible. And the professional bodies were helping us, or as were partners, to try and source speakers from around the globe, rather than just the same people that you would see. Speakers that actually, if you were attending from the Eastern Hemisphere, they'd have the same accents that you were used to and the same backgrounds as you. And then finally, it was the platform. We had no idea what we were doing. We'd never really hosted a virtual thing. We're a Teams-based organisation, so it was as flat as Teams can get. We're not. Teams was only launched in the pandemic, so it was a huge learning curve for us. So we went to Live Union.
So we helped across 3 areas: experience design, the virtual platform, and then the broadcasting of the event. And I think in terms of the experience design, clearly we were looking to get this global audience of young people together. And we realized it had to be very different to a traditional engineering conference. And we came up with it, we used this mantra, which was by young people, for young people. And we realized that the graduates within National Grid were going to be a fantastic resource for us. So we pretty quickly made the decision that we'd get them involved. We decided to have 4 live streams at the heart of the event. And their involvement was really threefold. We kind of mentored them to come up with different formats for the live streams and ideas they had to make these as interactive as possible. They were also tasked with finding contributors. So they went out to their peer network, they went out through One Young World, through National Grid, and found fantastic contributors for the sessions. And then finally, we persuaded them to host them as well, which was a really big ask, because they're grads, they'd never done anything like this. As I say, thousands of standing up in front of thousands of their peers. It took a lot of coaching, but they actually did a fantastic job of doing it and getting up in front of them, and it enabled us to create something that you could actually say was an authentic youth experience, because they were the face of it. In terms of the virtual platform, we delivered it on our platform, which is called Beehive. And the benefit of it being our own platform was that our digital team could tailor it precisely to the needs of this event. And that was really, 2 things. Mobile compatibility was incredibly important, and then language, translation of the platform and of the content as well. From a creative point of view, again, we wanted something that put a smile on people's faces. We wanted a sort of something that relaxed people into the event. And we came up with this idea to create a virtual eco-park. And we thought, let's situate it in the Scottish Highlands, because COP's happening in Glasgow. So let me show you where we got to with that. Sharp-eyed of you can just see the Loch Ness Monster in the bottom left-hand part. So in terms of the audience experience, so people arrived on the platform, there was a welcome video that orientated them to the experience. They could then personalize their profile, and they could link to their social media networks. They could also, the attendee list was completely searchable, so they could go through it and they could look for people that they wanted to meet with, and they could book one-on-one video conversations or schedule them on the platform itself. And this idea of sort of making the networking easy and natural was absolutely fundamental to creating this inclusive community. So, for example, in the networking space, we had a whole host of topic-based roundtables. So people could go in there, video roundtables, and they could spend time with 4 or 5 other people. And I think that's one of the things we've found with virtual is one of the big benefits of it is you can create these little mini communities. And I think when people coalesce around a shared topic, I mean, a bit like what we were doing earlier here today, the networking is so much more effective. Also in there, we had things like a social wall, so you could see all of the activity that was happening on the social channels. We had a pledge wall, so you could see the commitments people were making within their organizations. And then you could go over to the exhibition zone, and in there, National Grid had done a fantastic job of getting sort of 25 corporate partners. You could go in there, you could meet with any of them. There was also the opportunity to look for jobs opportunities. So I think really what we managed to do with this is we brought together young people from different countries, from different backgrounds, to access opportunities and to have conversations that normally they were excluded from. Just a little bit on how we kind of pushed this out, because one of the really important things with this is that we realized as much as possible it had to be live and it had to overcome time zones as well. So just in terms of how we did that, we pretty quickly decided to repeat it twice, so do it across 2 days so that we could hit the time zones. The first day was live from the UK, second day with a live host in the US, and all of it was streamed from our studio in London. And then I think when we talked about it being, when we talk about as much of it as possible being live, we did make the decision that the first half hour should be hosted live but have some pre-recorded content. And the reason for that was because it allowed us to get some fantastic speakers. So, we had Alok Sharma, the president of COP. We had John Pettigrew, who's the CEO of National Grid. And then we had some of our young people like Joseph. So that sort of helped with the marketing of the event, and it helped give sort of gravitas and context. And then that was followed by our 4 live streams that happened after, and they were repeated twice on each day. And as well as that, there was the live streams. You obviously had people who were, they were doing the networking. They were doing the one-on-one video calls. They were going to the round tables. They were looking at the social channels. They were kind of in the exhibition space. So we managed to create this kind of rich and varied live engagement.
Which brings us to our inclusivity achievements. So, bullet list here. The main one was that it was free to attend. Not everyone's got the money to attend a conference. It just makes it more viable for you to sign up and for you to come. As I said before, it was graduate-led content. So they were curating content that was basically something that they would want to listen to, something that they would want to hear about, or something that they would want to talk about. Partnerships. We had 23 partners that decided to have an exhibition stand, so to speak. We had further partners that chose to exhibit in our gallery poster wall because they didn't have the manpower to man a stand. And then we had others that basically just helped with speakers, to source speakers from around the world. We had a social media marketing campaign, and that targeted Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We learnt very quickly that Instagram was the better one for us for this event. It was the one that drove most sign-ups. It was the one that was spoken about more. It was mobile compatible, so the access meant that anyone, anywhere could pick it up. You didn't need a laptop, you didn't need anything in particular, you just needed an internet and a browser as such. It streamed on a lower bit rate so that those areas with poorer internet got the same user experience as such. Language was a big one for us. There was a bit of toing and froing as to what we do, because we can't just say that it's inclusive and it's global and then do it all in English. So we chose French, Spanish and Mandarin as live translations, And for all our on-demand content, it was subtitled and subtitled in English as well for anybody that was unable, but that had difficulties. Time zones, as Jed said, we did a little bit of a recce to see where we could get sort of the widest spread of engagement across the globe. So that's why we chose to do it over 2 days. And then we had all of the content available on demand post COP26 as well. So anyone that had registered to attend could go into the platform at any time and then pick up anything that they couldn't see then. We had this safeguarding facility because it was open to under 18s. We didn't want them to be able to have a video chat with anybody. So Live Union disabled that if you ticked the box that you were under 18. And then we had the Green Jobs Board, which had over 70 jobs from ourselves and all of our partners, and it just meant that they reached a wider audience, and the audience that they were reaching were able to see what kind of jobs were out there in the fields that they were interested in. Evidence of our successes. We had lots of emails back thanking us. It's great. It was great for a first thing. It was nice to be able to see this. I don't normally get the opportunity. You could see from the stats that Live Union pulled out that people had attended various. They were building relationships with other attendees and not just interacting with the exhibitors or something. So we had 1,877 attendees from over 110 different countries. The 110 different countries kind of blew my mind at the time. It was never, 20 was my target kind of thing, and it soon became a sport closer to the event as we logged in every day to see where they'd come from, and you'd see the likes of Trinidad and Tobago, Australia, the Philippines and Indonesia. It was amazing. Hindsight, we had about 4,000 registrations, and I believe there's a big drop-off of virtual events anyway, but hindsight, we did start the registrations on our website and then moved over to the platform, so that may have caused complications, but you live and learn. The average age of our audience was 18 to 24, and the post-evaluation also showed that 26% attended a one-to-one chat with an attendee, 43% attended a networking table, 45% spoke to an exhibitor or interacted with an exhibitor, and 54% researched the Green Jobs Board, which they're not so bad. The one that completely blew us out of the water was the social media side. We had 39 million social media impressions, which wasn't anything we were expecting. But it kicked off the fact that actually if we do live coverage of an event, our social media guru came, attended the event and sort of either tweeted or LinkedIn or something, I've just attended this session, it's great, or I've just heard about this, have you heard this? And then the social media wall that we had on the platform as well with people actually attending. It also strengthened all our relationships with partners that we already knew and we brought on board, as well as created new relationships with those that we hadn't worked with before, which was invaluable for A, the work that we were doing on COP, and B, for the possibility of doing the event again in the future. It's still on the table and waiting to hear whether we will do a GEC 2.0, as it might be. The proposal is that we do, and we do it in early December, post COP26, strengthened by the fact that we won an award at the Mice Book Awards on Friday. So hopefully that will bring partners on and encourage them to do it again.
Cool. Thanks, Sandy. So just to wrap up, I just wanted to sort of draw a few conclusions I think we can take from this in terms of what this conference tells us about the opportunities of the event landscape that we've all moved into kind of post-pandemic. And I think, to solve the critical challenges that we face in our businesses, that we face in society, like climate change, we need new ideas, we need new perspectives. And innovation happens when kind of half-formed ideas and different perspectives rub up against each other. And I know it's sort of a bit bombastic to say this, but events are an amazing format for this. And events in that way have the power to change the world. But they can only do that if events are inclusive, if they're bringing different personalities, different experiences, different people from different backgrounds together. And we don't always do a very good job of that as an industry. And I think there's one, if we just have a look for a moment at gender. So US event company Freeman, who do a lot of large kind of, a lot of what they do is exhibitions, but I think that the stats are still impressive. they looked at their events post-pandemic. And they started off by looking at the ones that had remained virtual. And the gender split was kind of 47% female, 53% male. They then looked at the events that had gone back to being in person. And female involvement dropped to 25%. Now, they put that down to the disproportionate burden of childcare on women. Also, when they looked at racial minorities, they found a massive drop-off in racial minorities attending in-person events as opposed to virtual events. And when they sort of dug deeper into this and did more research around it, they came up with the conclusion that diversity and inclusion is the number one long-term priority for the event sector. So we're not for 1 minute suggesting that all events should be virtual. That happened to be the right solution for our event. But I think if events are going to reach their true potential, if we're serious about events being inclusive in the same way that we're all serious about the workplace being inclusive, we do need to think about these digital channels and look at the opportunities that the merging of live and digital gives us when we're designing events. And I think, we've heard some amazing conversations. I was in one earlier about the BT hybrid example. It doesn't just have to be hybrid. Sometimes I think it's more about like the hybridizing of event programs, where people decide they'll have some in-person and some virtual. It might even be looking at the in-person events themselves and thinking like, are we regionalizing these enough? But I think, to finish with, the sort of ask to ourselves and to everybody in this room is to ask that question as to whether our events are truly inclusive. Thank you very much.